we begin?
John Gibbons started a tradition of reading my late wife Sarah Getty's poem, Spring Cleaning. And so we continue that tradition this morning with the help of my daughter, Lisa Koshik, and my grandson, Devin Koshik, and my granddaughter, Dara Koshik.
Spring Cleaning by Sarah Getty. Open the house, let the sun roar in and corner the huddling dust. Let the March wind tear down cobwebs, sweep out crayon and cookie crumbs, Christmas needles, smells of vapor rub and smoke.
In the brisk new daylight, get things straight. Clean the hall closet, organize your desk, go through your wardrobe, your game plan, your old loves, sort, evaluate, throw things away.
Remove the victims of winter's grudge, littering the yard like a battlefield. Haul away the big black branch that's lurked there like a beached squid since January. Lop off its limbs and stack them. Rake slimy leaf rot off the tulip beds. Let clean heat reach the bulbs.
Root out the old hurts, the cozy unsuccesses. Forget that your sister wasn't at your wedding, that your father didn't seem to like you much. Get rid of the birthday party no one came to, and the men who never asked you out again. Bundle the demeaning medical procedures and leave them at the curb.
Pile up the lost job, the student evaluations, the ideas of what your in-laws should be like. Burn them. Burn the time your 6-year-old came home from school and you weren't there. Burn the anniversary evening that wasn't fun. Burn the bad poems and the rejection slips.
Be ruthless as March, be a lion. Under the clean limb trees, be fierce and neat. Hunt out the beasties that fatten in the dark. Let the sun scour, let the wind prowl, and pounce.
And we will sing. This is hymn number 298. Wake now my senses, and we'll sing verses 1, 2, and 3. And please join me in the words of our unison affirmation, which is on the inside of our order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. So be it. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the First Parish in Bedford, gathered in love and service for justice and peace. This morning on the cover of the Globe, there was a great picture of our youth, Tim and Cole Bennett. Did anyone see that? It was great. They were wearing these togas for St. Patrick's Day, so that was fabulous. For Ides of March. That's great. And also, last night I went and saw the Bedford musical, Anything Goes, and that was terrific. Some of our youth were in that. That was just really, really great to see. So things have been melting. Maybe you've been cleaning out your cupboards and dumping it on the curb, whether that's real stuff or something you've been carrying around. So welcome. We hope spring is right around the corner. And we're so glad that we're all here together this morning. Welcome, new visitors, and welcome, old friends. Here in this church, human beings have gathered for centuries seeking a higher purpose and deeper life than they could find alone. We are grateful today for each one of you, that you have found your way here to First Parish and that this community can be a place where you thrive. We are more vibrant because you are a part of this community. We welcome you here just as you are. We celebrate the many diversities among us: age, race, class, varying abilities, sexual orientation and gender identity, political beliefs, religious beliefs. We come together this morning to share in the spirit of community, to create lives of joy and meaning, and to ponder, worship, love, and serve. Here may we acknowledge our brokenness and be stirred by love's infinite possibilities. Here may we become the people the world needs. My name is Megan Lyons. I am one of the ministers here at First Parish. Senior Minister John Gibbons is still away on sabbatical, but he will be back on April Fool's Day, and I am soliciting great tricks, jokes that we might do something funky as a congregation. So let me know if you come up with any great ideas. Shh, don't tell him. Oh, we hope he doesn't watch that on Bedford Cable Access TV. All right. Our student minister, Laura Fell-Scolton, is visiting Ohio, where she's at a UU Allies for Racial Equity conference, so do ask her about that when she gets back. So some folks are away, but it is not just us chickens here this morning. It's an honor to welcome to the pulpit Gregory Pelley. Greg, I'm so glad that you are here. Let's see, what can I tell everybody about you? Greg is currently a consulting minister serving the UU Society of Mill Creek in Delaware. He recently completed an internship at the Wellsprings congregation in Exton, Pennsylvania. And he completed his work on his MDiv at Meadville Lombard Theological School in January. He was welcomed into preliminary fellowship by the UUA last fall. Prior to engaging his call to ministry, Greg was an architect and a stay-at-home dad. A wanderer by circumstance and perhaps by habit, Greg has crisscrossed the country, residing in 7 states over his lifetime thus far. He is married to a lifelong UU Caroline, and he has 2 daughters, Sydney and Grace, and 2 dogs, Ellie and Ricker. They currently reside in Wayne, Pennsylvania. Greg, it's great to have you with us this morning. Thank you for being here. Speaking of being the people the world needs, I'd like to pause for a moment just to highlight something that matters a lot. In the past couple weeks, there were a few more incidents of anti-Semitism in our school system here in Bedford. John Sills, who's the superintendent of Bedford Public Schools, sent out a letter to families, and it's also, you can also read it on the Bedford Citizen and the Bedford Minuteman websites. This incident, there were a number of things, and the one I'm going to mention now is that there was an indoor recess, and kids started playing a game called Jail the Jews. And nobody really understood where this game had come from, and people were pretty quick to say, well, whose parents are teaching them that? And I'd like to see it in a different way. The kids playing the game, some of them were trying to make sense of this game, and some of them said, this feels wrong. And they went home and they talked to their parents. They said, we played this game, we don't understand it, we don't like it, we didn't know what to say. And the parents said, we're so glad you've told us, now we can do something. So the parents talked to the clergy brought it up, the school system knows, they talked to their teachers, and it's actually on the table for discussion, which is so good. Where does talk like this come from? It isn't something we should ignore. It is something we should back our children in figuring out together. If children are wondering about these hate-filled words, adults have these words within us also. And so the Bedford clergy and the Bedford school system have come up with something called the Love Your Neighbor campaign. This is just starting to begin and unfold. Nancy Doherty created a logo. It says, Love Your Neighbor, Bedford Embraces Diversity. And we're gonna have these out. You can click on them on our Anno list and print these out. You could hang it in your window. And this is a way to say, we too, as people of faith, stand by our neighbor. We will not stand for hatred and misunderstanding and bigotry and prejudice in this town or anywhere in the world. And we do support our young people in figuring out how to stand up to this kind of a thing and to say, together, no more hatred on any form like this. So I'm proud of those young people for saying, help us out. And there is a meeting at John Glenn Middle School Thursday night, the 20th, at 7 p.m., which is a community-wide meeting, and all are invited. There's also a prayer that the Bedford clergy put together, and I'd like to invite all of us to share this prayer together. It's on the back of your order of service. May our beloved town of Bedford be blessed with healing from all hatred. May our homes overflow with loving kindness. May all our children grow up in the safety that encourages them to be their own best selves. May our public spaces welcome strangers and friends with abundant grace. And may our citizens of all backgrounds and traditions share generously with and learn eagerly from one another. Amen. Thank you. And let's take a look at the inside of our order of service and the back cover as well. These are places that we can find announcements and upcoming things in church. Today at 4 o'clock, you'll find information about a great concert. This concert is put on by the music committee here at First Parish in Bedford and the Bedford Center for the Arts. This is an event called March for the Arts. It features jazz and pop music by the Groves family, Cynthia Mork, Ben Sears, and Brad Connor. Net receipts will benefit the Bedford Center for the Arts, and there is a yummy reception following the performance, so don't miss out on great music and yummy things to eat. Let's see, congregational conversations continue. There is one that is happening today at 12:30 in room 201. You might want to be part of that. It's a great place to share all your thoughts of what works, what you'd love to see more of, what's happening, what makes you come alive at First Parish. Mystery friend letters are due today. And if you would like to help out with the Bedford Community Table, this is something that happens often. I think it's every week on Thursdays at 5 o'clock. If you'd like to help out this week, First Parish is serving. And so do talk to Carla Olson. You can talk to me, and we'll put people in touch with each other. All right. And, lastly, do check out the art gallery. It's up there. It's a new show. It's great, and you won't want to miss it. And so welcome, one and all. We are so glad you're here. And now, let's see. This is a stewardship moment by Jeff Spear.
Good morning. This year's stewardship campaign, kicking into high gear next week, is all about the things that we do to support First Parish. Our time, talents, and treasure help make this place prosper. I joined First Parish about 2.5 years ago when I moved to Bedford. I went to a nearby UU church growing up, so I knew what to expect. Well, maybe not the disco ball. But for my wife and son, it was a new and pleasant experience. Together, we enjoyed the never-ending novelty of church services. We attended events like the Apple Festival. Our son is enrolled in OWL. The animal blessing from 2 years ago was one of our first services. We brought my mom's dog, Brady. Next time, we may bring our 2 new kittens, Milo and Rambo. I was going to say that until our first stewardship campaign, I hadn't thought about how First Parish was sustained, but that's not quite right. Really, I knew what it took. What I hadn't thought about was my part in it. First Parish was playing a larger and larger role in our lives. We were part of the community, and that means giving as well as receiving. Last year, I was asked to join the stewardship committee. I haven't been on a stewardship committee before and hadn't really thought about doing it, but at the same time, I knew how many people gave their time doing all the things that need doing around here. I was happy to contribute in this small way. It's probably more a contribution of time than talent, but what can you do? First Parish does a lot of good for a lot of people in our community and beyond it. I like being part of that in whatever way I can. If you feel the same way, please consider giving some of your time, talent, or treasure. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to tell a story this morning. The story was related to me by a wonderful minister named the Reverend Victoria Safford. If you have an opportunity to read some of her work, it's really gorgeous. The story is about a little girl named Sweetie. I actually don't know that that's her name. I think that's just what her grandmother called her. And Sweetie loved the playground. She loved going to the playground with her grandmother on Saturday mornings. Her grandmother would pack some fruit and maybe a couple bottles of water, and they'd walk down the street and go to the playground. And it was one of these wonderful playgrounds that had with these huge play structures that you could climb up on or under and run through. And of course there were slides, which are my favorite, and also happened to be Sweetie's favorite. And there were 7 of them, 7 slides on this playground. And there were the little short, fast ones that she liked, and then there were the kind of like the bumpy ones that would bump you down as you went down. There were long, curvy ones, and there were the tunnel ones, right? The tunnel ones that go through. And in fact, the tunnel one was the one she liked the most, and it was the tallest slide in the playground. It was way up on this high platform. It was a big curving tunnel slide, and it was blue. And the reason Sweetie liked this one so much, she told her grandmother, she said, "Grandma, it's like sliding through the sky." It's like sliding through the sky. So this day they are at the playground, and she likes to kind of build the excitement, so she goes down every slide first before she gets to her favorite one. And she rides down the red one, the red fast one that goes straight down, and one of the bumpy ones. And she climbs all the way up to the top platform where she can see almost the entire park, and she can see the pond in the background, and she see the baseball field where the kids are playing. And she just loves it up there. And then she always turns around. She always does the same thing. She turns around. She goes, "Grandma, look at me." And Grandma says, "I see you, Sweetie. I'm watching. I'm always watching." And when Sweetie would launch herself down the slide, it was always with a big squeal of delight, right? Except this day. Except this day, because when Sweetie swung herself into the slide and began to come down, Grandma heard the squeal, but there was something off. There was something wrong. It didn't sound the same. It didn't sound joyful. So Grandma starts to hurry over to the slide, and as Sweetie comes out, she comes bursting out of the slide, screaming and running across the playground, and says, "Ow, ow, ow, get them off, get them off." And she collapses on the ground. And Grandma runs over to her and says, "Sweetie, what's happened? What's happened?" And she's waving her arms, and she goes, "Get them off." And Grandma looks at her arms and sees the welts start to swell up, these big red welts. And she goes, oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. You've been stung. You've been stung by bees. Let's get you home. Let's take care of you." And so she scoops Sweetie up, and Sweetie's crying and kind of whimpering, and they get her home. And Grandma gets some bags of ice and puts them on the welts. And Sweetie gets pretty quiet for the rest of the day. In fact, she's pretty quiet the rest of the week. She doesn't go outside and certainly doesn't want to go to the playground. And one day, Grandma is fixing breakfast, and Sweetie comes into the kitchen and says, "Grandma, are they mean bees?" And Grandma says, no, bees aren't mean. And Sweetie kind of goes, "Oh," and stomps off to her room. And then later that day at lunchtime, Grandma's fixing a sandwich for Sweetie, and Sweetie comes in and she goes, "Grandma, are bees bad?" And Grandma said, "No, Sweetie, bees aren't bad." Well, Sweetie didn't like that answer either. She was stomping off to her room again. And then at supper, she's really quiet, not saying much. And finally, she says, "Grandma, are bees supposed to sting us?" And Grandma leans over and puts her hands on her face and says, "No, Sweetie, I don't think they're supposed to sting us." And then Sweetie says, "Well, then why was I stung by bees? Why did the bees sting me?" And she begins to cry. And Grandma grabs Sweetie and pulls her into her lap and says, "Sweetie, I don't know why. The bees aren't bad. They're not supposed to sting us, but sometimes they do. You and the bees just happened to be in the slide at the same time. Maybe they were scared. I don't know. But I tell you what, let's go to the library tomorrow, and let's go find out about the bees. And let's go find out everything we can learn about the bees, because here's what I'm scared of, Sweetie. I'm worried that if you don't ever go back to the playground, if you get afraid of the bees and don't want to go back outside and play, what's that going to be like for you? Or what would happen if one of your friends got stung by bees?" And Sweetie thought of her friend Charles, and she really liked Charles, and they liked playing on the playground. And she thought, if Charles got stung, I'd want to be there to put ice on his arms, like Grandma did for me. So they went to the library the next day. They went to the library and they looked in the books and they looked on the internet and they found out all they could about the bees. They found out what a bee's house looks like, so they knew to look for them and where to avoid them, and found out all the wonderful things that bees do for us. And so that Saturday came around, and Sweetie and her grandmother went to the playground, and Charles was there, and Charles and Sweetie were playing. And they got all the way up to that top platform, the top of the big blue slide that was sliding through the sky. And they checked really carefully for the bees. And they decided they were safe. There were no bees there. And they turned to Grandma and said, "Hey, Grandma, watch us." And Grandma said, "Oh, I'm always watching. I'm always watching you. I'm always watching." So at this time, our children and their leaders may go to their ingathering. And we are going to sing. We're going to sing a song called "Comfort Me." It's in your teal hymnal. It's a beautiful hymn that I like to sing, particularly when things are a little bit tough, maybe when I've been stung by bees. And I know it's a little unfamiliar to many of you, so our gorgeous choir is going to help lead us through it.
right, start again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
My name is Jeannie Balfour, and I'm one of the lay visitors. Now is a good time to come up and light a candle for a joy or a sorrow. At the end of the service, I will stay up here in the front if you'd like to light a silent candle. The last candle is for those thoughts that remain within us.
So now I invite us to enter into a time of prayer, of meditation, of reflection, such as it is with your practice. And I invite you to perhaps set aside whatever you may be carrying in your hands, and then perhaps set aside whatever you are carrying in your heart, whatever is rattling around up here in your brain. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel your body supported by these chairs, by these pews. Feel the gentle pull of gravity holding you to your home. If it's comfortable for you, I invite you to close your eyes. And then I invite you to do the one elemental thing that we share in this life. Take a breath. Breathe in and breathe out without rush or hurry. Right now, there is nowhere else to be. There is nowhere else to go. So let us be here, now, present, in this place, with these people. Let us take a few moments of silence together. May you know, in the days to come, whenever you seek the peace and solace that you feel here now, know that it is as close to you as your own breath. And may it be so for us today, and may it be so for us in all our days to come. Amen. So we have a reading this morning from a fabulous poet. Her name is Ellen Bass. A collection of poetry that I particularly enjoy called The Human Line. And this is called If You Knew. So what if you knew you'd be the last to touch someone? If you were taking tickets, for example, at the theater, tearing them, giving back the ragged stubs. You might take care to touch that palm, to trace that life's line's crease. When a man pulls his wheeled suitcase too slowly through the airport, when the car in front of me doesn't signal, when the clerk at the pharmacy just won't say thank you, I don't remember they're going to die. A friend told me she had been with her aunt. They had just had lunch, and the waiter, a young gay man with plum black eyes, joked as he served the coffee, kissed her aunt's powdered cheek when they left. Then they walked a half a block, and her aunt dropped dead on the sidewalk. How close does the dragon's spume have to come? How wide does that crack in heaven have to split? What would people look like if we could see them as they are? Soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time.
The offering is a sacrament of the Free Church. It is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join with us. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. Freely we have received, freely we give.
Come away, fellow sailors, come away. Your anchors be weighing, time and tide will admit no delaying. Take a boozy short leave of your nymphs on the shore, and silence their mourning with vows of returning, but never intending to visit them more. No, never intending to visit them more. No, never intending to visit them more. Come away, fellow sailors, come away, come away, come away. Your anchors be weighed, time and tide will admit no delay. Take a boozy short leave with the nymphs on the shore, and silence their mourning with vows of returning, but never intending to visit them more. No, never intending to visit them more. No, never intending to visit them more.
Well, I deeply appreciate the invitation to come and speak with you in this gorgeous church. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I'm sitting here, I'm reminded of a friend of mine who likes to, who does a lot of, he's a young minister, and he does a lot of pulpit supply around the area. And he likes to post pictures of all the pulpits that he's preached from. And he takes pictures of the front of the pulpit. And I love them, they're beautiful. But it occurs to me as the preacher, that's not the view of the pulpit that I often see. So if you will beg me the indulgence, and I'd like to take the picture of the pulpit that I see on Sunday mornings. Big smile. Thank you. Appreciate that. Forgive me, I'm not used to having such a wonderful choir. Thank you. So about these bees. Excuse me. About these bees, are they mean? No, bees aren't mean. Are they bad? No, not really. Are they supposed to sting us? No, not necessarily. So then why do we get stung by bees? Why do the bees sting us? Why? And this question of why and of how we pursue questions like this, because I think we humans get caught up in this sort of illusions of cause and effect, and it's important that we do so because, you know, we get our bearings in the world that way, right? We ask, something happens, we ask why. This is how we start to understand our world, start to make sense of what's happening around us. And to be clear, these questions of the whys and hows are important, even vital to our existence. Our wonderings of the why and how of this world have led to great discoveries. I'm very anxious for Monday's press conference. These questions have built civilizations, cultures, religions, philosophies, arts, science. And even when we have done those things, when we've built these things from our questions, our biggest questions always seem to remain just unanswered. Or perhaps just when we think we found the answer to one of these questions, what we find unfolding underneath it are more questions. And sometimes even our best answers seem, at least to me, to be really inadequate. I spent about a year working at a place called Children and Family Urban Ministries in Des Moines, Iowa. And this was an organization committed to serving children in an economically challenged part of the city. As you well might imagine, it was also one of the most racially diverse areas of the city, probably the only racially diverse areas of Des Moines, Iowa. So my natural tendency, when I find myself in unfamiliar surroundings, unfamiliar places, unfamiliar people, is I kind of like to sit back and observe. I like to sort of ease my way into community. And so in my observations, I'm often trying to discern the why and the how of what is happening around me. So while working at Children and Family Urban Ministries, I spent a great deal of my time wondering why these children were in poverty. This agency had been around for 40 years with the goal of eliminating poverty in this particular area of town. And 40 years hence, they're still working on it. Why are our efforts to alleviate the plight of these people seemingly failing to do so? And maybe more personally, how am I supposed to do anything about it? I remember there was a kid there. His name was Marcus. And in almost every interaction I saw him, he seemed mean. He was one of these young bullies in the making. He would scan the room. I'd watch him. He would scan the room with this sort of sneer, looking for the next kid to pick on. And I admit right away, I did not like him. I did not like him at all. And so one day we were watching the kids, supervising the kids playing on a playground. And Marcus, we had just put in timeout again for kicking a kid again. And he's sullenly sitting on the bench in timeout. And I, sort of exasperated, walked to my supervisor and I said, "What is the deal with Marcus? What is his problem?" And she looked at me and she sighed. And she said, "Well, Greg, he hasn't had it easy, that's for sure." And then she told me that Marcus's mother had completed suicide a couple years after he was born. And then shortly after that, he had an older brother that died of cancer. And then after that, his father was found to be dealing methamphetamine out of the house. And so Marcus was taken away from his home and was placed in the custody of a grandmother. And you know, as she told me this, my gut, oh my God, being kicked in the gut, and my head was swirling. Because I think I'd been so focused on my why questions. Why is this kid so mean? My wondering and judgments about Marcus. And suddenly in this story she told me, it occurred to me that these questions, these searches that I had into my vast unknowing had become barriers to authentic relationship. Now, this term, this phrase, authentic relationship, I hear this used quite a lot, and I think it's one of those phrases we use that sounds good, but we don't necessarily really discern what it means. So at least for me, what that term means is that authentic relationship is when we're seeking a kind of relationship where we can be fully ourselves, whole and complete, and the person we're with are fully themselves, whole and complete as well. Authentic relationship. But of course, that's a lot easier to say with a beautiful phrase like authentic relationship. It's a lot easier to say that than to actually be that and do that with people. Our lives come up against other people's lives. And for myriad of reasons, we fall short of engaging in authentic relationship. We get scared. We get sad or angry. Oftentimes, especially for me, perhaps for yourselves, I feel challenged. Challenged when our very identity is sort of shaken up by someone else's experience of the world. Sometimes I slip into denial and resistance. Sometimes we seek to defend ourselves against what we perceive as a threat against who we are. So I think this is what is happening to me when I'm working at Children and Family Urban Ministries. One of the things we would do every evening, we would open up the door to the dining hall to anyone in the neighborhood, anyone, to come in and have a hot meal. For many people, that was the only meal they would have that day. They didn't have to ask, they didn't have to prove themselves. Nobody was asked anything. You walk in the door, grab a plate, you sit down, you have a meal. And so I would spend the evening, I'd chat with people as they came in the door, greet them warmly. I'd help the kids get their food, make sure they didn't just get chocolate cake. I'd help clean up at the end of the day, at the end of the evening, wipe down tables, put away chairs, all that sort of thing. But here's what I never really did. I never ate. I never sat down and had a meal. Because, of course, the way I saw it was I had a fridge full of food at home. When I was done working, I would go home and I could eat pretty much whatever I wanted. And to take a plate and sit down and eat with the folks in that neighborhood we served meant that there would be one less plate of food for someone who really needed it. And I had convinced myself this was the right thing to do. But you know what? I think I was just scared. Because I think my worldview, my sense of who I was in the world was being challenged when I was in that space, when I was with these people. Because for me to take a plate of food and have an authentic relationship with these folks could force me to reevaluate my own lifestyle. It would require me to look deeply into my privilege and understand that my privilege was part of the systems that help keep people in poverty. And not just people in general, these people. These people walking into the dining hall every evening. And in my fear or denial or challenge, I stood apart, observing, evaluating, but never really stepping into the kind of relationship where I could be whole and complete and where the other person could be whole and complete as well. So I stuck with my why questions. In her story that I shared earlier about the bees, Reverend Safford offers an alternative question to the why. She says, rather than ask why, the far more serious and echoing question is, so what will you do now? And I think for our little girl in the story, Stung by Bees, the questions, instead of why was I stung by bees, why did the bees sting me, the question becomes, will I be scared of bees? Will I stand in my fear and forget the playground? Will I teach others about both the wonder and the danger of bees? Will I comfort a friend who has been stung? Who will I be in this world knowing that there are bees that are not bad, not mean, not exactly supposed to sting us, but sometimes do anyway? When my supervisor finished telling me Marcus's story, and as we left the playground to go in for supper, I began to see him more tenderly. One moment I thought he was one of the meanest kids I had ever met. And the next, one of the most vulnerable, one of the most precious. And here echoes of Ellen Bass's poem began to ring in my head. What if you knew? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen? And for me, I had to move. Right? I had to move from these why questions, and I had to get comfortable with a little bit of ambiguity. I had to get comfortable with my unknowing. I had to see who this boy was now, in the present. And when I did so, I realized that my how and why questions were inadequate, and I had to ask a different question. I had to ask myself who I was going to be in that child's life. And if I had blinked and if I had turned away when I learned of his sorrow, I would have missed the chance to make just a little bit of difference in this life, in this kid's life. I would have missed the chance to be one of the few people in Marcus's world that sought to be his friend as he was. Not the boy I wanted him to be. Not the one I wished him to be. But the child he is. Full of pain and fear and suffering, yes. But you know what? Also full of joy and hope and promise. And when I shifted from the why to who will I be now, it became possible for me to be present with this child as he was, with the children, all the children there as they were, simply just present and aware and at peace with them. I had to step into something though, right? I had to step into being challenged. I had to step out of my denial and resistance to those whose lives were different than my own. To step into the possibility that their lives were probably not that much different from my own. I had to admit that I do not and may not ever have the right answers. I had to be willing to hold both the joy and the pain in those relationships. I had to step into that ambiguity, step into my own fear. But here's the thing, part of the gospel, part of the good news of our Unitarian Universalist approach to religion is that when we are at our best, we are cultivating our spiritual awareness through our experience, and particularly through our relationships. We cultivate our spiritual awareness through our relationships, and as we do so, we become more aware. We become more aware of how our lives, or maybe we use the term spirit, how the Spirit calls us, or it's as God, how God calls us into this world. However that is for you, what calls you into this world. We become more aware of that. And in our daily living, we're going to run up against the Marcuses of the world, the people that we foist our judgments upon, the people for whom we're always asking why. But when we change the question, we change the relationship. When we ask who we want to be in that person's life, we generate this spark of connection. And when we connect ourselves one to another, we find ourselves called then to connect more deeply to all those around us, and even those who are suffering, who are in pain. We are called then to connect to those whose lives necessarily aren't living the ways that we understand. We may not understand the way they live. But because we are learning and growing, because we are learning to live our lives with our own humility and a generosity of spirit, these connections that we make with others are going to lead us to discover new understandings of our spiritual source, this holy ground upon which we walk. Reverend Safford reminds us of this. The world was made, she says. The world was made gorgeous, tender, broken, dangerous. We know not why. But the real religious questions open up wide and holy, exciting, dangerous, urgent, comforting, sustaining. Comforting and sustaining. These questions open up when we accept the mystery and move on, or reverently move in. Friends, the world was made. It was made gorgeous and tender and broken and dangerous, and we know not why. How now shall we live in it? You and I and all of us. Blessed be and amen. Let's sing. Let us sing. Join me in singing hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us. A blessing this morning. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Amen.